Welcome back again today. Before I start this video, I want to say I will be talking about kingdoms, empires, and civilizations that existed in both modern Ethiopia and Eritrea. There are conflicting beliefs and views of this area. Please keep in mind that before countries, there were empires and kingdoms that did not have the modern day boundaries. Please keep this in mind. Don't compare modern to ancient boundaries, and that I tried to condense this video in the best way I could. Ethiopia, the largest and most populous country in the Horn of Africa, boasts a rich history that spans from prehistoric times to present day. Formerly known as Abyssinia, its territorial boundaries have evolved over the millennia. The ancient capital of Aksum, located in the northern part of the modern state, played a central role in Ethiopia's history. Over time, Ethiopia's territory was solidified, particularly in the 1800s and 1900s. Situated entirely within the tropical latitudes, Ethiopia became landlocked after Eritrea succeeded in 1993. A population of Eritrea believes that this area was theirs before 1993, with the Eritrean Liberation Front growing discontent with Ethiopia rule in 1961. Addis Ababa, the capital city, is positioned near the country's geographical center. Human lineage were found in Ethiopia, with the Hadar remains. Skeletal fragments of Australopithecus, or known as Lucy, dated back hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago. Afro-Asiatic language groups such as Cushitic, Semitic, and Ometic are spoken in Ethiopia. Over 90 languages are spoken, with the top 4 being Oromo, Amharic, Somali, and Tigrinya. During the second millennium BCE, cereal grains and the plow were introduced. Ge'ez-speaking people established the kingdom of Da'amat in the northern highlands. This ancient kingdom would be established around the 7th century BCE, engaging in trade with South Arabian merchants. After 300 BCE, the kingdom of Da'amat declined due to redirected trade routes. This would lead to smaller city-states rising up. Aksum, an inland state, emerged as the dominant power under the Tigray Plateau. It controlled trade routes, including ivory to Sudan, and a Dulles port on the Gulf of Zula. Aksum's culture was influenced by Ge'ez, South Arabian alphabet, and ancient African deities. Legend tells of a cultural exchange between Aksum and the Arabian Peninsula, symbolized by Queen of Sheba and King Solomon's mythical union. By the 5th century CE, Aksum dominated Red Sea trade, minting coins featuring their emperors and images. Christianity arrived in Ethiopia in the 4th century, introduced during the reign of Emperor Ezana. The Ethiopian Church aligned with the Coptic Church, rejecting the Christology proposed at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. This event would break ties with Rome and Constantinople until the later half of the 20th century. At its zenith, the Aksumite Empire exerted influence over the Kingdom of Meroe to the west, the Omo River region to the south, and Spice Coast along the Gulf of Aden to the east. The Kingdom of Himyarites in present-day Yemen in the Middle East also fell under Aksum's control. Emperor Caleb ruled from 500 to 534. He would demonstrate Aksum's strength by intervening across the Red Sea to protect fellow Christians in Yemen. He would do this to stop the persecution by a Jewish prince in the early 6th century. However, Aksumite power in South Arabia declined after 572, and this was due to Persian invasion and subsequent disruption of trade. The rise of the Arabs in the 7th and 8th century further isolated Axum from the Mediterranean trade routes. As Christian maritime activity waned in the Red Sea, Aksum's towns also declined. The empire shifted focus southward, annexing nearby highlands rich in grain. Monastic centers also moved southward, with a major church established near Lake Hake in the 9th century. The Ege, a subject people, adopted Ge'ez and Christianity. They would eventually assimilate the Aksumite rulers. A Ege prince later relocated the empire's capital to Lasta, giving rise to the Zagwe dynasty in Ethiopia. Though accused of not being of pure Solomonic lineage, the Zagwe rulers left their mark in religion. Emperor Lalibela ruled from 1185 to 1225, overseeing the carving of 11 church from living rock in Roha. These are located in modern-day Lalibela. These monuments were a testament to the Christian religion and Ethiopian culture expansion. During this time to the east of the kingdom, Islam had replaced most of East Africa from their traditional African gods. To the west of the kingdom, many tribes still believed in traditional African gods. The decline of the kingdom led to opposition from Tigray elites and emerging Amhara people. These two ethnic groups would contest the legitimacy of the Solomonic lineage. In 1270, nobleman Yikuno Amlak rebelled against Emperor Yedaberic. The nobleman was supported by monastic churchmen who legitimized his descent from Solomon. The Kibra Nagast, or Glory of the Kings, mythologized Menelik I's birth. This would cement Ethiopian nationality unity under the Solomonic dynasty, Semitic culture, and Amharic language. Islam's spread in Ethiopia led to conflicts, particularly with the Efat Sultanate. Emperor Amda Tessian waged wars to expand the Solomonic power and establish cults. Internal reforms accompany external conquests, with monarchs promoting religious culture and suppressing traditional African practices. Conflicts arose between the church and the state, resolved partly through land grants. The monk Iwo Statewos preached isolation from state influence and Sabbatarianism. The monk would challenge the Solomonic authority. Emperor Zara Yaqub initiated reforms and campaigns against heretical sects. He also faced threats from Muslim encroachment, defeating Efat Sultanate in 1445, but later confronting Ahmed Ibn. Ahmed would lead a jihad against Ethiopia, and in 1541, Emperor Galaudios, aided by Portuguese musketeers, defeated Ahmad. This would secure north-central Ethiopia for Christianity. Population pressures among the Oromo, a pastoral people, increased in the 1500s. Their society revolved around the Gada system, with warrior classes raiding and wrestling to prove themselves. The Gada system was an indigenous democratic socio-political system that even had rights for women. This system governed the Oromo tribe of Ethiopia through knowledge gained over generations. This system regulated economics, social activities, religious activities, and regulated politics. The system also enforced moral conduct and importance on social cohesions in the tribe. This is just one example of democracy in Africa, in which many believe did not exist. By the 1600s, Oromo expansion had pushed into Christian Semitic-speaking agriculturalist territories. This would prompt Emperor Sarsa Dengel to restrict his rule to certain regions. This period coincided with the arrival of Jesuit missionaries, notably Pedro Paez, who persuaded Emperor Susenyos to adopt Roman Catholicism. Susenyos faced resistance and abdicated in favor of his son Fasilides. His son Fasilides would establish a new capital at Gondar. Under Fasilides and his successors, including Johannes and Iyasu the Great, Gondar flourished culturally and economically. Empress Mintiwab continued this progress jointly with her son and grandson until factionalism led to the kingdom's collapse in 1769. This marked the beginning of the Zama Mesafint, or the Age of Princes. This time period was characterized by feudal anarchy of princes fighting all over the country with a puppet emperor that they would install. During the Age of Princes in Ethiopia, life was challenging for most people as power shifted from the central court to the regional princes, who often engaged in battles for supremacy. This period saw increased oppression of the farming population as armies pillaged the countryside. This time period, the Age of the Princes, would last until 1855. However, significant developments occurred in the south, including agricultural growth in the Gabi River basin, leading to the formation of the Oromo states. The rise of the Gunga people states in the Kifa highlands and the establishment of a powerful kingdom within the Ethiopian Empire in the northern Showa, claiming Solomonic descent. In the north, Ras Kasa emerged as a significant figure, ultimately bringing an end to the Age of the Princes. He built a formidable army and monopolized trade revenues in the lowlands. By 1847, he gained recognition from Gondar's magnates, and in 1853, he defeated the last Oromo lord, Ras Ali. Kasa was crowned Emperor Terodros II in 1855 after consolidating power over northern Ethiopia. Emperor Terodros II would force the submission of Showa, thus laying the groundwork for modern Ethiopia. Tewodros II's rule was marked by attempts at social reform, but his efforts to establish garrisons nationwide and to convert church land led to rebellions among regional aristocrats. In 1862, he offered an alliance to Britain's Queen Victoria to destroy Islam, but the British ignored him. This would lead to a diplomatic incident, and this resulted in a British military expedition in 1868, which ultimately led to Tewodros' suicide. Johannes IV succeeded Tewodros, ejecting Egyptian armies from Eritrea and forcing Showa kings to submit. He sought to oust the Egyptians from coastal Eritrea, but faced challenges from Italy. Johannes repulsed Italian forays inland, but was killed in 1889 while marching into Sudan. Menelik II, succeeding Johannes, signed a treaty with Italy granting rule over Eritrea. However, he later learned of a mistranslation, allowing Italy to claim a protectorate over Ethiopia. Menelik sent expeditions to obtain modern weapons and defeated at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. This would secure Ethiopian sovereignty. Under Menelik II's reign, Ethiopia experienced significant territorial expansion, and this would be between 1896 and 1906. Ethiopia would extend its borders to their present size. This expansion included acquiring highlands, key river systems, and a buffer of low-lying zones around the state's core. Revenue from these newly incorporated regions was utilized to modernize the capital, which is Addis Ababa. This revenue also established educational and healthcare institutions and developed communication networks. Menelik also engaged a French company to construct a railway connecting Addis Ababa to Djibouti. These foreign entities would facilitate the exploitation of Ethiopia's resources by foreign merchants, and they also would collaborate with the ruling elites in Ethiopia. This period marked a significant transformation in Ethiopia's infrastructure and engagement with global economies. As Menelik II aged, he appointed a cabinet to rule over his grandson and his wife, and his grandson would be Ayasu. He would appoint a cabinet to rule over his grandson and family. However, upon Menelik's death in 1913, Ayasu assumed power and aimed to create a society free from religious and ethnic divisions. He removed many of Menelik's governors, integrating Muslims into the administration, which upset the Christian ruling class. During World War I, Ayasu flirted with Islam and the Central Powers, seeking to regain Eritrea and reduce Shoan dominance. However, his actions provoked protests from Allied powers, leading to his disposition in 1916. Following Ayasu's removal, Menelik's daughter, Zayuditu, became empress but largely served as a symbolic figure. Rastafari, Menelik's cousin, would act as a replacement under the queen. Rastafari, Menelik's cousin, would be being groomed to actually be the emperor under the empress at the time. Tafari initiated modern bureaucratic reforms, secured Ethiopia's entry into the Leagues of Nations in 1923, and abolished slavery. By 1928, when the empress named Tafari king, the economy was flourishing, mainly due to coffee exports. In 1930, the empress would pass away, and Tafari proclaimed himself Emperor Haile Selassie I. He introduced a constitution in 1931, fostering modern institutions and development projects. However, Mussolini's Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, leading to Haile Selassie's exile. Ethiopia remained under Italian occupation until 1941, when Haile Selassie returned to power with Allied assistance. After World War II, Haile Selassie aimed to regain Eritrea, which was federated with Ethiopia in 1952 with the USA's support. During the 1950s, Ethiopia experienced economical growth driven by coffee exports, used to centralize governance, enhance infrastructure, and modernize urban areas. Haile Selassie introduced a revised constitution in 1955, balancing power between the emperor and parliament while maintaining his authority. In December 1960, while Emperor Haile Selassie was abroad, there was an attempted coup by members of the security and military forces. Although the coup failed, it highlighted the country's social and economical problems, leading to increased discontentment. However, the emperor ignored the significance of the coup and proceeded to name a new government in February 1961. This would largely maintain the status quo, and relied on traditional power structures. Haile Selassie struggled to implement significant land reforms, which further alienated progressives and students who opposed the regimen. Over time, the monarch lost credibility, particularly as it faced challenges in Eritrea and with Somalia. Somalia's independence in 1960 encouraged Somali nationalists in Ethiopia's Ogaden region to rebel in February 1963. However, Ethiopian army swiftly crushed the rebellion, with Somalia's subsequent military alliance with the Soviet Union altering the regional balance of power. This led to increased arms expenditures for Ethiopia. This would necessitate more support from the United States. Simultaneously, an insurrection in Eritrea escalated. This would attract disaffected Christians and radical students who criticized Haile Selassie's regimen as imperialistic and oppressive. By the early 1970s, Ethiopia faced internal strife, with a significant portion of its military deployed in Eritrea. Also, its army was in other regions of Ethiopia to suppress rebellions. In January 1974, a series of mutinies led by junior officers and non-commissioned officers would erupt, blaming the imperial elites for economic hardships and social issues. Drought and famine exacerbated the situation, leading to international criticism of the government's handling of the crisis. In response, the Coordinating Committee of the Armed Forces, Police, and Territorial Army, known as the Derg, emerged as a significant political force. Under the leadership of the Major Mengistu Haile, the Derg dismantled the monarchy's institutions, leading to the deposition of Haile Selassie in September 1974. Following Haile Selassie's removal, Mengistu consolidated power and initiated social reforms. This would include land redistribution and nationalization of key industries. However, these policies failed to improve agricultural productivity and exacerbated social discontent. Meanwhile, with conflict with the country of Eritrea and the separatist Tigrayan people in Ethiopia, tension would escalate, leading to increased militarization and Soviet support for Ethiopia. The government faced significant challenges from rebel groups such as the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or EPLF, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. This would eventually lead to the forming of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, or EPRDF. As the government's control weakened, particularly in the rural areas, popular resistance grew. These events would lead to Mengistu's flight to Zimbabwe in 1991 and the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front assuming power. Following the ousting of the Mengistu regime in 1991, a new government led by the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front under Meles Zenawi aimed to democratize Ethiopia by recognizing its ethnic diversity. This transition period saw the creation of a transitional government tasked with drafting a new constitution. They were also tasked with organizing elections and recognizing the rights of all tribal groups to self-determination, leading to Eritrea's legal independence in 1993. The new government initiated Ethiopia's first federal administrative structure, devolving power to ethnically homogeneous regions. However, central control remained strong, and regional governments aligned closely with the EPRDF politically. This approach sparked concerns among some elites, particularly the Amhara, who felt marginalized and saw the country's unity as a threat. Throughout the early 1990s, economic reforms were implemented with the assistance of donor governments and the World Bank. These reforms aimed to liberalize the economy, attract foreign investment, and address issues such as currency devaluation and civil service redundancies. However, challenges persisted, including slow progress in privatization and ongoing concerns about land ownership and nationalized property. In 1994, Ethiopia adopted its third constitution in 40 years. This would establish the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and enshrining principles of regionalism and ethnic autonomy. The country held its first multi-party election in 1995, but they were met by opposition boycotts and allegations of government interference. This would allow the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front to stay in power. In 1998, border tensions with Eritrea erupted into war, leading to a protracted conflict that ended in a peace agreement in the year 2000. Despite the agreement, relations between Ethiopia and Eritrea remained tense, and border issues persisted. In the early 2000s, internal dissent with the EPRDF, compounded by drought and famine, which weakened the government. The 2005 general elections, characterized by allegations of irregularities and violent protests, further strained the political landscape. Although the EPRDF retained power, tensions continued, culminating in a crackdown on oppositional groups and activists. Former leader Mengistu Haile in absentia and sentenced to death for his role in the Red Terror campaign. Meanwhile, Ethiopia intervened militarily in Somalia's civil war in 2006. This would create more tension with Eritrea. In 2010, general elections saw the EPRDF maintain its dominance, although opposition groups criticized the electoral process. They would cite media bias and harassment. Despite international observers deeming the elections largely peaceful, concerns remained about the government's commitment to democratic principles. Following the death of Prime Minister Meles Zenawi in 2012, Haile Mariam succeeded him. The subsequent years saw continued economic growth under the EPRDF, but also a deteriorating human rights situation. This was marked by harsh anti-terrorism laws used to suppress, which would lead to the arrest of journalists and opposition activists. The 2015 general elections were criticized for government harassment of opposition groups and stifling of the independent media. The ruling EPRDF won every legislative seat, and Haile Mariam was re-elected prime minister. The government faced protests, and particularly from the Oromo people, against a plan to expand Addis Ababa, leading to the plan's abandonment in 2016. In early 2018, amidst ongoing unrest, thousands of political prisoners were released, and Haile Mariam resigned, hoping to usher in political reform. His resignation was followed by the declaration of another state of emergency. Abiy Ahmed, an Oromo, was elected prime minister, promising to improve conditions, fight corruption, and resolve conflicts, including with Eritrea. Abiy's reforms led to the release of more prisoners, lifting of the state of emergency, and removal of opposition groups from the terrorist list. In a surprising move, Ethiopia announced its acceptance of peace agreement with Eritrea. This would end a 20-year state of war. Abiy formed a new cabinet with gender balance and appointed Sali Zawidi as the first female president. In October 2019, Abiy was awarded the Nobel Prize for his efforts to resolve the border dispute with Eritrea. However, his reforms also stirred ethnic tensions, leading to violent incidents, including a failed coup attempt and the murder of oromo activists. This would trigger protests and ethnic violence. His reforms would marginalize the TPLF, leading to the resentment from the party. Crackdowns on corruption implicated many Tigrayan officials, exacerbating tensions. In late 2019, the Prime Minister championed the dissolution of the EPRDF and formed the Prosperity Party. This party would exclude the TPLF. The federal elections scheduled for 2020 were postponed due to COVID-19 pandemic. This would lead to accusations of power grab by the Prime Minister from the TPLF and other opposition leaders. In September 2020, Tigray held regional elections, further straining its relationship with the federal government. The government would allegedly withhold funds from the Tigrayan administration. The hostility between the Tigray and the federal government erupted into violence in early November. The TPLF would accuse the Ethiopian government of attacking their region, but the Ethiopian government would say that the TPLF would attack federal military bases. The TPLF also states that the Ethiopian government cut off aid and food to the region. The Ethiopian military would launch an invasion on Tigray, leading to the prolonged conflict. Despite claims of victory by the Prime Minister in late November, fighting continued. This would displace millions and triggered famine conditions. This would lead to Eritrea to the north and Ethiopian government to the south, sandwiching the region and the Tigray. Ethiopia would make a deal with the country of Eritrea to give some of Tigray land to the Eritrean government. The Tigray felt like this was their land, but Eritrea as a country felt as if the Tigray land or part of the Tigray lands were part of their country. All sides were accused of human rights abuses during the conflict. In June 2021, delayed federal elections were held, but not in Tigray or certain other regions due to insecurity. The Prosperity Party won a majority of seats, but fighting escalated during the election week. Tigrayan forces would advance towards Mekelle. Federal troops and interim officials withdrew, and Tigrayan forces retook the capital. A unilateral ceasefire was declared by the federal government in June 2021, but fighting persisted and spread to other regions. A humanitarian ceasefire declared in March 2022 provided a temporary respite, allowing for aid delivery, but hostility resumed in August. Mediation efforts by the African Union led to signing the Pretoria Agreement in November 2022. This would mostly bring an end to the 2-year conflict. The agreement included provisions for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of Tigrayan rebels and rebuilding of war-damaged infrastructure in Tigray. This was a very hard subject, the whole history of Ethiopia, to cover. Hopefully I did a good job on it. Not saying that I said everything right or pronounced everything right, but I tried the best that I could. Please like, subscribe, and follow. Make sure you touch the bell notification button and go to the top bell notification so you'll get all my videos. Add me on all social medias, which is African Network. Until next time, peace, one love.